Why, hello, Internet. I'm John Schaefer, and I'm here to kick off this first Friday stream for Atomic Mass Transmissions. I'm very excited to get started, and today I'm going to be painting Agent Kallus, the intrepid ISB officer for Star Wars Legion. He's got a lot of cool options, and today I'm going to be painting the version of him with his bow staff. I guess one thing that we should probably address at the very beginning of this stream is that unfortunately we have experienced a bit of a delay with the release of the Republic and Separatist Specialist packs. Those are now going to be delayed until March in the US only, largely due to some transit delays on the rail system. So the good news is that they will release at the regular time next Friday for the rest of the world, but we'll be looking for the release in the US in the beginning of March. So with that being said, we got a lot to cover when it comes to painting this miniature, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we'll get right into it. Oh my goodness, everybody. I just realized that this audio channel has been off this whole time. Can you guys hear me now? That was a first-time blunder. Excuse me all. Welcome back to the stream here, where I can actually talk and you can hear all these things that I've been saying. So in summary, let me go back to the very beginning. I applied a zenithal prime to this fellow. I started off with a gray and then hit it with a lighter white. I went ahead and went through and painted all of the, and applied the texture to the base ahead of time the first time around. And yeah, the other important bit that you might have missed at the beginning of this stream is the unfortunate news that there is going to be a delay for the release of the Republic and Separatist Specialist packs in the US only due to some rail transit line delays and congestion. We won't be seeing those releasing in the US probably until early March at this point. The good news is that if anywhere else in the rest of the world, you can certainly still expect for those to release next Friday on the 19th. Okay, so where was I? So we're going back to start to apply some of the layers here for the armor color. And as I kind of mentioned before, which you obviously didn't hear, is that I'm deciding to kind of make some adjustments to the color scheme of Kallus to kind of match my existing collection, which is this kind of field gray color. Ailman field gray is what it's called in Skull Color. So again, I've kind of thinned down the paints a little bit with some flow improver and some matte medium, so I have a little bit of transparency to them. And this will kind of be applied as a wash over top. Go in here and get his chest plates. If you're looking to do the version that you see on screen, I think a good replacement color for this would be a color called Anthracite from Scale Color. It's a nice, cool gray. It's got a cool base to it, nice and bluish. So matte medium, you can get that at art supply stores. It's something that's used for acrylic painting. And most hobby or craft stores will carry it in the painting section, so you can usually find it there. And then as far as flow improver goes, there's a product from Vallejo that is used for airbrush. It's this airbrush flow improver. This stuff. Let's see if we get that in focus. There you go. That guy. So for that concoction, I just mix up, half flow improver and half matte medium, and then I add that to the paint, and then just kind of add more and more of that mixture to dilute the paint in such a way to achieve the level of transparency that I really want. Here, and get the rest of this helmet in. I've opted for the helmeted version. He does come with 2 additional heads. There's a, which I'll probably save for a future stream. I was thinking about doing a little something on painting faces in the future. So he comes with these kind of 2 additional heads here. He's got kind of a grimacing version and a stoic version. And he's got all this other kind of cool stuff. All right, gonna continue, and while all this stuff dries, I'm gonna go ahead and apply a quick base coat down to the base on those rocks because I want those to stand out a little bit from the rest of the base. So I'm gonna go in there with kind of a kind of like a salmon color, I guess. Some kind of colors that you might see in the Southwest. Just apply a base coat to these rocks to make those things pop out just a little bit. And when you're trying to paint for speed, that's usually a big part of it, right? Or you've got to kind of bounce around to the different areas of the miniature while things dry. If you are painting in a batch, like a whole squad at one time, it's a little bit less of an issue because you can just move from one miniature to the next as things dry. But I'm trying to get this guy painted in an hour. I'm just going to hop around a little bit to different areas and use some different colors. And just about any sort of rocks or sand will do, but I particularly like the look of slate, which you can get online, or if you're lucky enough in certain parts of the world, you might be able to find it in your backyard. But it has like a nice cool tooth and edge to it that looks good at scale. I think Lando comes with two faces. I think he comes with a smiling one and a kind of more closed mouth version. The two. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I'm going to go and add just a little bit of a bluish color to the staff, so it just stands out just a little bit more. Mix these two together and go ahead and paint this on. Now for the staff, because I intend to make this kind of glow a little bit towards the ends, I'm not going to go all the way down to the tip because I want to keep that nice bright white for the yellow and orange energy glow that I'm going to apply afterwards. So maybe about that far, something like that. I'm just going to add a little bit of water here, and I'm just going to feather out that edge a little bit. I know Dallas and Will like to use a second brush for that. But I oftentimes just use the same brush and just dip it in some water and come back. And just feather out those edges. You just have to be a little bit quick with it. You know, you can't let it dry so much that the paint becomes really hard to feather out. Just add just a little bit more water to this, thin it and pull it down here a little bit. And we'll go back in over top of this with some oranges and some yellows over top. Right. Cool. I see a little area there underneath the helmet that I got to hit for the neck. Put that little bit in there. So more information about Lando and Kallus is probably going to be forthcoming next week on Will's stream. I think he's going to try to bring in our Legion game developer, Luke Eddy, into the chat to kind of talk about the character and the design process. That should be a really cool one. Okay, mostly just kind of going through here and just tidying up some little spots where I might have missed. Or I'm going to take that same field gray color. I'm going to mix up just a little bit of brown wash into it. I'm going to use this to kind of help me define some of those deepest recesses on the old miniature. So the color is going to be kind of like this. I'm using this kind of thing so you can kind of see just how transparent it is. Let me see if I can get that in focus there. So pretty thin, and just kind of mixed in a little bit of dark brown into it. And I'll use this to kind of chase some of these recess spots, like where armor plates come together and some of these darker spots. Just add a little bit more definition to this green. A bit under here too. See a little spot underneath here where I missed. This chest plate in here as well. Oh man, somebody's asking me about the color puce. It's a fine one. A little dusty rose kind of color. We oftentimes had this joke in the office that the puce is loose. Okay, we've got a good start here. Let's go ahead and get a base coat down here on the face. He's got a little sliver of face in there that we got to get in and paint. And again, I think I want to use a little, some thin down paint to be able to kind of fall into those recesses pretty well. I'm mixing up here pink flesh from scale 75. It's about the same color I used on those rocks down below. In here, get a little bit of face action going. Oops. Try not to get any on the bow staff. It's a little bit of a different painting angle than what I'm used to, so excuse a little bit of sloppiness here and there. I will become more well versed in it, I'm sure, as the streams continue. All right, got a little bit of face in there. We'll go ahead and highlight that nose a little bit later. So I'm going to start to add just a little bit of a highlight to this. Just make it a little bit flatter up on the raised spots on his armor panels, etc. A couple highlights. You really, when it comes to your tabletop miniatures, I know that Will and Dallas have both kind of mentioned this in the past, but you really just want to focus on that face. Like the face is a really big part. I think also kind of a defining characteristic of this guy is going to be this kind of glow effect that we're going to have going on the actual bow staff itself. So that's going to be kind of like a defining characteristic. So we might want to spend a little bit of extra time on that. I'm also like a pretty strong believer in not being too particular and too precise on the early stages of painting, and I kind of like to go back in and do like a bit of a touch-up step. Just I feel like I'm getting more done as I'm moving around the miniature and applying more colors to it. It gives me a better feel for how everything looks, and then I can just always kind of go back in with a little bit of a touch-up step. I like some nice little highlights to these areas up on the helmet because this is going to be a bit of a focal point, so I want to spend a little bit more time on those. Just a little bit here on the top, and we'll just feather this out a little bit. Okay. Just take a damp brush and just kind of pull that down a little bit and feather out that edge a little. Getting a good transition from that lighter kind of minty green down to the regular base coat color. Right. He's also going to have these little tiny dots here, which are kind of the imperial markings. They're usually like blue and red little details. So that'll be a nice little contrast on the rest of the armor. So his armor or his undersuit there has kind of like a two-tone effect on it, where the second color is a little bit lighter than the first. It's kind of a lighter gray. So I'm going to add just a little bit of gray to my palette here. And that's largely contained on the shoulder pads, and like there's a center stripe in the middle of his suit. So it's this kind of stripe right down in here. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that base coat color over top of it, make that pop. We'll add another wash over top of this to make it kind of dull it back down a little bit. Up here on the shoulder pads. So this is kind of early days for Legion painting streams. If you guys have any general ideas about stuff and content that you'd like to see, please post them there in the chat. I'd be very curious to see what folks would really like to see. Of course, we want to paint some of the new releases and give people another look at some of this new stuff that's coming out. But I could also see us focusing a little bit more on specific techniques, like like I mentioned before, painting faces, bases, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of different avenues we can go down. All right, and just a little bit more of a lighter color here on the top of the shoulder pad. That's going to be where the light's going to catch quite a bit, so I'm going to just make that a little bit brighter. Same over here on this side. You can see it. If I were to paint this miniature for competition, I think I would probably keep the bow staff separate, because it is I have to kind of dodge around it a little bit. And it connects right at the wrist, so it should be a pretty easy thing to attach later. All right. I'll smooth out a little bit of these this black area down here on the pants and stuff. Yeah, lightsaber and glow effects, that's a very Star Wars thing. Applicable to a number of different armies too, so that's kind of what I think that we'd want to focus on, is stuff that you can use across all the factions, and not getting too much into specificity on what we're doing as far as individual applications, but just present you some ideas and how to paint and the techniques involved in kind of broader strokes, so to speak. All right, just tidying up a little bit of those highlights there on the leg. I could spend a lot of time in here, like making sure all of these highlights are just perfect and very slight and looking awesome, but I'm more concerned with the overall impression, I think. So I think I'm going to start to shift over and start working on a little bit of this this glow on his bow staff, the electricity on the ends. I like that that we modeled that detail on there. It just gives painters a fun little thing to mess around with. Okay. Before we move to the bow staff, though, I am going to apply one more coat over top of his face. I like to apply thin coats over top just to not obscure detail, and make sure that you can keep all that recess and all those raised areas popping. All right, that's how he's looking right now. Let's go ahead and start to add a little bit of yellow for these electricity bits at the end. Now I'm just starting with pretty much straight up yellow, Soul Yellow from Scale Color. And this I'm also going to thin down just a little bit. If we look here at the old transparency tool, you can kind of see that it's got a little bit of transparency to it. It's still a little thinned. Get that back in focus. There we go. Now, Kallus's bow staff has a yellow glow on it in Rebels, whereas Zeb's has a purple. And I was toying with the idea of purple because it is one of my favorite colors. But I think for right now, I like the idea of this yellow in conjunction with the scheme. So I'm going to go with the more canonical version. Painting tips on creating blaster damage. That's a good one. Yeah, I like that. That sounds really cool. Weathering and battle damage is like one of my favorite things in painting. I think that's why I paint so many tanks and vehicles. And terrain. A lot of terrain stuff too that uses those same kind of techniques. All right, so add just a little bit more water and we're just gonna feather this back in over top of everything else to kind of get a suggestion of that glow. And this is a fast and dirty way of doing it, so don't judge me too harshly. Or do, your choice. I think we probably want it to extend about that far, and it's going to catch just the tip of this this blade just a little bit. All right, we've got about a half an hour left. I'm feeling good. Feeling good about the progress. I think we're doing all right. And then just take a damp brush here and just feather out those edges a little bit more. Just kind of standard blending techniques. Got a little bit here on the edges here. This will pop out a little bit more than that. And I don't think I'm going to go too far beyond the actual staff. I think, you know, those lighting effects can like really be massive and bright and can really take over a lot of the miniature, but I like to keep it a little bit more subtle, I guess. And I'm going to achieve that by, you know, dialing this back down and kind of blending things back in from the black on up. And while this is still a little wet, I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit of Mars Orange into it too, just to add a little bit more depth into that glow. Now it's going to be the brightest and most intense at kind of towards the tips there. So a lot of this is, I'm taking a little bit of that mix that I had before and thinning this paint down. And I'm just going to apply this orange like a little bit further down, like around in here. And I start to get that effect going on. And the orange will eventually kind of convert into the darker kind of bluish gray that I had going on before. In here. Yeah, and I like the shape of these little bits here on the end. I think that they take a wash well. They've got like some cool little recess bits that make it really fun to paint. I think you're going to see some skilled painters do some pretty amazing stuff with this miniature. Just a little bit of that. Just going to pull a little bit of that warmth up further up in here towards the tip. And each time I'm kind of like pulling the paint, like I want it to transition here, but I want to pull it up into here, up into where it gets a little bit more intense. Because wherever you let off of the brush, that's going to be kind of where it pulls a little bit there. So start down here and then just pull up a little bit, and it'll start to, through multiple layers, it'll really start to make that transition smooth like you want it to. He's got a little bit here on the edge of his fingers. And then we can also go back with that same kind of bluish black that we had before and work it the other direction, where we start here in the middle. And we just kind of paint that in there and just blend it in. It starts to get a little bit smoother. Again, this will not be a perfect example, but just generally trying to show you the overall approach and using some transparent and thin paints and feathering them out on the edges. A little bit of water or your special mix of flow improver and matte medium, or whatever you decide to use. Cool, that's looking pretty cool so far. I think that now we've probably want to spend a little bit of time tidying up those armor plates. He's looking a little splotchy in some spots. So I'm going to start to add some edge highlights in here into the most critical parts. The edge of this little part right here, little face mask bit. And notice that I've choked kind of way up on my brush. This is a size 2 brush here with a good tip on it, but I really like to get way up close to the very tip of it and then kind of brace my hands and then orient the miniature in such a way that I can easily have a lot of control over the tip of my brush. I think that's that's when you really want to kind of you have a kind of a standard thing, and like this is a comfortable motion for me, so I'll move the miniature around a little bit in order to match that motion if I'm looking for precision. Pull that straight down, a little bit over the top there. I'll do the same. One other technique that often helps is, as opposed to going straight at that angle like this, use the side of your brush more and just let the actual edge of the raised armor plate do some of the work for you. We're also going to have like some little highlights underneath each of these little little holes on the front of the helmet. A little bit right here. We'll go back in with a darker color and define those, make those a little bit darker too. This just kind of suggests a little bit of light catching the bottom edge of that. And then the top of this collarbone section of the armor plate, I want to add a little bit of highlight there. Looks cool. I think the edge of this this rim around the back of his helmet certainly needs a little bit of definition, so we're going to make that pop. And that's what a lot of miniatures painting is all about. It's all about contrast, lights and darks next to one another. How can you possibly, get the forms to really stand out and show up through contrast of value in the paints? Value being like the light and dark, like how dark or how light something is. I like these little backpack vents that he has here. These are cool. They're a fun little detail to pick out. Little highlight here, a little highlight over here. On this side, I think I'm also just gonna turn this guy upside down a little bit and just do a little edge highlight here on this part. Sometimes you have to be really, really deliberate on the angle that you approach it at, so you don't, accidentally get some on an area that you don't want it. And then I noticed that I've got kind of an overly large highlight here on the back. I'm just going to go back in with that base coat color and just kind of shave it down a little bit. Oops, that's a little bit too light. So go back in here, add a little bit more brown to it, make it a little darker. Smooth that little bit out. All right, I'm thinking a little bit more contrast here is needed up around this area. So I'm thinning down a little bit of a wash. I'm just going to kind of paint it in some of those recessed spots. There we go. I like the brown in the shadows here. I think it just gives you a little bit more more depth to the color. So you've got a green, but it's shaded with a little bit of brown in it. And I like to kind of bounce around and add different colors in the shadows. I think it just adds to the complexity and the depth of the overall color. Take a little bit of black and just dot in these dots just to, again, increase that contrast a little bit. All right. And smooth out a little bit of this black here in some spots too. Make a nice little highlight on the top of these shoulder pads will make those pop a little bit. I think I'm going to do that next. Oh, you'd like to see the palette set up? That's interesting. Yeah, I can look into getting another thing set up. Right now, it's trying to keep the focus on the miniature from the camera's perspective is kind of tough when you have other things going on in the background. Things kind of compete and do some weird stuff. So yeah, maybe we could look at getting another camera set up to do some so you can see like the palette and how I'm thinning down the paints a little bit. That does not sound like a very difficult thing to do. All right, gonna smooth out these armor plates just a scotch. I went a little heavy-handed there, so I'm gonna feather that out a little bit. Okay, so let's apply a wash to the face. I'm gonna go in just with a kind of a standard brown wash here. Just try to define some of these facial features. I'm not gonna probably concern myself with trying to paint those eyes as recessed as they are. But I am totally down to do a little bit of a tutorial on painting eyes. I have a specific technique that I like to use when doing them. It usually involves painting the eyes before the rest of the face and then using the face steps and highlights to kind of tidy up the mistakes. I'm going to use a little bit of this brown wash here just to get a little bit more of a fade. All right, starting to pick out some of that stuff. And use a little bit of this black to kind of define some of these spots where the wash missed a little bit. I'll need to go through here and add just like a little bit of a lighter highlight to the bow staff in that kind of bluish tone, so it'll stand out a little bit more from the black undersuit. What's going on? I'm also just going to thin this down a little bit just to bring this down just a scotch. The gray shoulder pads here. Again, I'm kind of pulling this down here, and where my brush leaves off, it kind of leaves more of the paint, so it'll be a little bit darker towards the bottom. Cool. Let's make those boots a little darker too. All right, 15 minutes left. Doing all right. And for characters like this, this kind of approach, getting this kind of level done in an hour, totally fine for tabletop. It's going to look great when you're playing with your friends. But you can always kind of go back over top of this and spend a little bit more time, like tidying up some edges, boosting that contrast a little bit more when you need to. Take it as far as you want to. It's up to you. Choose your own adventure. Find some of those. So I'm going to tip him down a little. I see that I have a little spot underneath here where I want to make sure to make that really dark. Okay. And probably define this spot just a little bit better. This kind of stage I like to call lining in, where you're just taking a thin down wash and you're using it to kind of trace those recessed spots where maybe the wash didn't fall just so well. Just again to add that contrast back in. So underneath this chest plate here, he's got this like kind of line that goes underneath. I want that to be nice and dark underneath there, especially as it goes down underneath his arm here. I think underneath here, under the neck, just gonna add a little bit of this brown wash too, just to make that pop just a scotch more. The model does not, sorry, it does not come with additional hairdos. Kallus has got the kind of standard Imperial high and tight version. Not like you see him later on in the show when he moves over to work with the rebels, where he gets a little bit more loose with the hairdo, I suppose. I like that version. He looks cool that way. I opted for this version because I really like the look of that kind of ISB helmet. I think that's like a really cool design on that. That you kind of see on the communication officers and a few of the other ones. There's like some cool stylistic consistency there. Makes it look pretty awesome. Let's smooth this out just a little bit more. On top of the head there. Yeah, I definitely want to try to tidy up some of this stuff. This helmet's going to be a bit of a focal point here, so I'm trying to like smooth out a little bit of this transition in the color. All right, back to that shoulder pad. Add a little bit of an edge highlight to that. I'm just gonna add a little bit of white to that gray that I used before. Let's just put a little guy right here. Break down. Side. Same thing. Just feather out that edge just a little bit. Again, kind of pulling up towards the top where you want it to be brightest. Starting to get a little bit of a better transition there, the color there. And same on this side too. And a little bit of that. In this instance, Dallas or Will would probably be having a second brush in their mouth. Maybe I'll start to try that technique and see how it works out for me. A lot of friends that swear by it, but just not something that I've really tried personally. That's one thing I love about painting with friends. You always kind of learn some new techniques and some new tricks, and it's it's just such a great way to just get your miniatures painted. Is hanging out with some buddies around a table. Man, I can't wait till we get to it. In the meantime, I've been doing weekly hangouts with my friends and just getting a lot of stuff done. It's been great to just kind of connect with them. So hopefully you guys are finding some similar outlets like that to get your miniatures painted. It needs a little bit of a highlight here on the top of that belt. Make that stand out a little bit more. Smooth out that shoulder pad just a little bit more. This is how I like to paint. I just kind of like to jump around the miniature and just bounce back and forth between different areas and paint different colors. Some people like to just do one specific color to completion, from light to dark, but my personal style, I just, yeah, I like to move around a lot. I think that's more fun. Okay. I'm just going to add a little bit of that first color here. I'm going to tidy up that that edge highlight on his chest plate there. Just shade back into this just a little bit, just to make that a little bit more slight and smooth. Again, it's kind of in this upper portion of the miniature, a place where a lot of people are going to look first. So, spend a little bit extra time up on these spots. Okay. These areas would probably get just a little bit of a lighter color here too. All right, we're kind of getting towards the end here, so I'm going to start to add a few little highlights here to the face and some of these other areas that I've been kind of neglecting right now. I like to do a nice little thing on the lighter highlight here on the bridge of the nose. Make that pop out a little bit more. But because this face is so recessed, it's kind of tricky to get in there and do all of the highlights that you really want. I do think you need some teeth though. So let's get in there with a little bit of white. See if we can do this without messing things up. We'll tidy up that bottom lip a little bit so he doesn't look like he's got giant teeth. Cool. Coming along. Coming along. All right, so let's go back to that that bow staff a little bit, make that pop with a little bit more of that bluish gray. It'll be a subtle but distinctive color against the rest of the kind of the black on them. I'll thin down a little bit of that anthracite gray that I was talking about before. We'll apply a little highlight up here to the top. A little bit more white to that. Just another little highlight here along the haft. Got some of these details here. Make them stand out a little bit from the hand that's right next to him. Oh man, I could paint this guy for another hour, but they won't let me. I've got some real work to do too. I got some other stuff I have to get done before the end of the week. Just going to smooth this out with a little bit more transparent yellow here, just to kind of get that fade looking a little bit more tidy. Here too. Again, kind of pulling in the direction you want the color to be the most intense. And that works out the best for me. A little bit of white up here at the very tip of the bow staff energy too, just to make that have just a little bit more vibrancy to it. Get in here and just selectively add just a little bit of it here and there. Okay, a couple more minutes. Let's see what else we can get done here. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed watching me paint Kallus here. Again, apologies for the sound issue at the very beginning. I think it's just you know, first stream jitters. I forgot to click on the microphone again in my streaming software. But I will watch out for that next time for sure. A couple final highlights. As a final step, why don't we just go ahead and paint in those insignia marks on his chest, because I think that that's a cool little detail. So looking at my reference here, it looks like he's got 2 red on the far right as you're facing him. Oops, got a little bit on the bow staff again, kind of in the way. So those 2 are red. And he's got 2 sets of blue ones. On the far left. I'll have to look up exactly what all these little insignias mean. I know they're different for every rank. Cool. Just a little bit of white here for the last one. Well, hey, thanks, Big Bad Andy. Appreciate you stopping by and taking a look at everything. I haven't been that attentive on the chat. Hopefully I haven't missed any other general questions, but I'll make sure to review it, and we'll talk about that stuff next time. So just as a reminder, we are streaming 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday. Join myself, Will Schick, and Dallas Kemp as they paint a number of different miniatures for Legion and Marvel Crisis Protocol. I'll make sure to go back and review all of the general comments that you guys have had too about stuff that you'd like to see in future streams, and we'll get those on the docket. Try to get them all planned out. There's so many miniatures to paint, so many things to do. It's hard to decide, but at the end of the day, we do this for you guys, so we want to do content that you're going to enjoy. All right. I think that is Kallus for today. I think he turned out pretty well. Certainly see some areas that I'd like to refine through some future painting, but in general, I had a blast painting him. Thank you so much for joining us all. Make sure to tune in next week. As I mentioned before, we're going to have lots more streaming for you guys, lots of other things to do. You can always check our social channels for new news of new things that are going to be coming up, new articles, general announcements, lots of new reveals, lots of cool stuff. So make sure to check back with us next week. And until then, have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys later.